Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of the 7th console generation retrospective. Hopefully, you're all doing well, and this time we are going to be talking about the first of the 7th generation consoles that I actually ever owned, and that was the Xbox 360. Now, this was not the original because I had the original Model 1 360 originally years back, and then about probably around 7, 8 years ago, I picked this up several years ago. Pretty dang cheap, too. But the 360 is the one that I have the most personal memories of. Of the three, though, as time has gone on, I pretty much like, honestly, the PS3 and the 360 equally as much for different reasons. But yeah, this was the first seventh I would actually ever have. Of course, what did in my original model 360, it was, of course, the infamous Red Ring of Death, which came from, obviously, issues like overheating and many other things, which they would, of course, fix in the later Slim model, giving it a lot more space and a much bigger fan to prevent overheating. And I will say also, the Slim model is a much nicer design. This was the first Slim model, or the Model 2 360, and then we would get another one which would be more like the original Xbox One model, weirdly enough. You certainly have more than enough plugins and stuff for a USB, as well as, of course, HDMI and all basic outputs. Plus, on the front of this model, you had this, which, of course, you could plug in like a wired controller or to charge the battery pack up if you didn't want to waste money on countless amounts of regular batteries. Of course, you could also plug in memory cards now. For quite a few years, I actually had just like a very small model and didn't bother getting like the big hard drive model because I never got any digital 360 games ever. So everything I played was strictly physical, which only needed a memo, which originally I got the 4 gigabyte model on the slim version. But one thing I like about this specific console is the fact how easy it is to remove the hard drive. That's one of the nicest things, was the accessibility and easiness to do that, which I appreciate. But one of the things I learned to have on me back in the day, when I wanted to play on the go, simply got, which some of you may or may not remember, the small little USB 8 gigabyte 360. Now, technically, it was of course, a well known brand of memory cards, but then on the other side, it would have the 360 logo on, and it would light up on the clear. That way, it'll let you know about it, that you were downloading or anything. And this was the best way to take your game tag or any info with you to a friend's if you wanted to play couch co-op. But definitely this system holds a lot of personal memories for me, along with, of course, the Halo series, which had many great games like the original Halo Wars, which I love to this day. You had Halo 3, Halo Reach, Halo 4, which I think is genuinely underrated, and of course Halo 3 ODST, which is a superb game. Plus, you had the HD re release for the original Combat Evolved, the Anniversary Edition. Now, also decided to get some. I didn't want to get the Halo stuff off the side because I have that already separated for another future video. But thought I also mention, talk about a few things that really hold memories for me. The first of which was the original Assassin's Creed for the 360, which was one of the earliest games on the 360 and would, of course, become the beginning of what is today a massive size franchise that most people probably, well, younger, like Generation Z gamers and stuff who grew up maybe at the tail end of the 360 and stuff probably don't remember really the beginnings of Assassin's Creed 1. It was very unique and very different. I actually still think it looks pretty decent for the most part for its age. It's not age the greatest, but to be fair, I still think it looks pretty solid overall, and it's still a great game. And you can really see a lot of the elements, though, you can really see how it took most of its elements from its predecessor franchise, and of course, that being the Prince of Persia series, would later on become, through Ubisoft and individuals in there, and what originally was going to be like another originally game revolving around the with a new story and angle and stuff take in the Prince of Persia universe, but instead ended up becoming its own beginning of a massive franchise that ended up dwarfing, of course, that of the Prince of Persia series. Which, yeah, at the time when this came out originally, I never thought it would become what it did become. Massive. And if you're ever curious about getting the original Assassin's Creed, it's dirt cheap. You can get this easy, super cheap anywhere pretty much. So pick it up, give it a shot. I think it's good. Now, I've never played the other port of it, only played the 360, but this was one of my earliest games I owned on it. Still good memories. Other stuff that has really good memories for me is the Dreamcast Collection, which had, if you were into, like, say, fishing games, well, I can tell you Sega Bass Fishing is probably one of the best, more of an arcade-style fishing game. If you like fishing games, then perfect for you. Then you have the somewhat more rhythm type of game that is Space Channel Number 5, which is a very unique game from the Dreamcast era. And a underrated series, which I'm happy got remastered, even a VR version stuff. I'm glad at least it's starting to see maybe a bit of growth. It is definitely a cult classic, but I could say the same for mainly probably the two games that I mainly got this collection or compilation of for. That being the original classic Crazy Taxi and the original Sonic Adventures, which for me personally, Sonic Adventure 1 still stands as pretty much probably my number 2 favorite Sonic game of all time, arguably. Has definitely nostalgia factor for me, as well as Crazy Taxi, which would be my introduction to The Offspring, a great punk band. But, with that said, also you had a very unique MMO. This would be the first MMO I would actually ever try. And the main reason I decided to try it was because it was Final Fantasy. Or more specifically, Final Fantasy XI. Sadly, servers for the 360 version are pretty much good and dead. The only way you can play this now is pretty much on PC, though you might get lucky through European servers, because this game is still actually alive and doing decent in Europe, believe it or not. 11 has quite a huge following in the PAL region. Also, of great games that became cult classics, the original, of course, Mirror's Edge, which is a superb game, great, though I personally like Mirror's Edge Catalyst a little bit more, but still, I see where everybody comes from when they praise and gush about this game. It really was very unique for its time, and I appreciate DICE for making this game. Which I'm glad, at least at the time, DICE was left alone by EA, thank goodness in those days. That was back before, though, I 100% hated EA. But still, a superb game I highly recommend. A game you can get super cheap because I bought this for like $1.99 years back, and that is the original, of course, Lost Planet, which over the years I've become a pretty big fan of the Lost Planet series. I specifically like this one the most. Then I would say I also quite a bit like Lost Planet 2, as well as I even like the interesting, unique, cel-shaded art style Japanese only release EX Troopers. It's definitely a very unique game that takes place in the same universe. But seriously, if you've never tried the original classic Lost Planet, do yourself a favor and try it out. It's one of the best, in my opinion, third person shooter games easily of the seventh console generation. I would probably put it in maybe my top three favorite third person shooters in that era. It's just that good. Also, arguably, in my opinion, the best of the Transformer game franchise, and that is War for Cybertron. This game is superb, criminally underrated. It deserves a lot more love. This game was definitely made as a love letter to Gen 1 fans like myself and others. I'd say really appreciate this game more than many others. But if you're looking for a good, solid action game with mech fighting and stuff, you can't go much. Well, you can't go worse. And there aren't too many mech games I can think of that are actually better than this. Easily the best of the franchise as a whole. Then we have fighting games that most people sadly hate on, which I have no clue why. That being Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Love this game, always will love it. I don't know why it gets the hate it does, but it is a great game nevertheless. Now, yes, I originally got this for the PS3 first. And then later on got the 360 version super cheap. That's one thing, this is a good time to collect for the 360. Great console, super cheap. I mean, there is countless amounts of games you can get for under $20. No problem. Seriously. And there's basically something for everyone in genres. Then we come to, in my opinion, maybe about the best comic book or pretty much movie tie-in game. This is one of the few times when the game ended up better than the movie. And that is no truer than with X-Men Origins Wolverine, specifically the Uncaged edition, though, I recommend. This is a superb third-person action game with great hack and slash elements, and it does have its own, like, somewhat original story and stuff versus the movie it's based off of. But yeah, this is one of those few times that a movie tie-in game ends up surpassing the actual movie. Now, with GoldenEye, I love the game, but to be fair, GoldenEye movie is one of my top three favorite Bond films, so 50-50 for me with that case. But this is definitely a genuine case where I much prefer the game over the movie. But yeah, if you've never actually tried this and you're an X-Men fan, seriously give it a shot. Also, this would be the beginning of my love for the Soul series. Yeah, I actually played Dark Souls 1 on the 360 before I actually played Demon Souls on the PS3. Now, that would be my second Souls game, and then not too long after I would end up playing Dark Souls 2. But Dark Souls 1 still holds a special place for me, definitely as my introduction into the franchise, though, as I've said before, Dark Souls 2 is my personal favorite in the series, but that everyone has their own taste and everything. But Dark Souls 1 still is a great game that I highly recommend, though. I probably recommend getting the remastered version just because it is going to look better, though, really. Unfortunately, pretty much none of the bugs or issues in the game were fixed in the remaster. Because, boys, there are a lot of issues with hitboxes and things in this game. But that's kind of something that's become a trademark of the series now. Arguably, in my opinion, bang for your buck, probably the best compilation collection ever. And that is, of course, the Orange Box, done by Valve. Back when Valve actually made games, though as of late it looks like Valve is coming back at least. Where they did the new VR Half-Life game, though unfortunately it's exclusively Steam and attached to a $1,000 VR headset, which I think you have to be stupid to spend that kind of money for one game. But for me, great. This was my introduction to Team Fortress, which is a great, though I'm not a big multi-online person. I'll admit I actually like Team Fortress 2. There's something special about the game. Kind of feels like Pixar, but mature rated. This also was my introduction to Half-Life, with the original Half-Life game, along with the Episode 1 and Episode 2 extensions. And then we have arguably the best part. This was my introduction to Portal. Portal 1, which is arguably in my top, of course, if you're curious where it's overall ranked, check it out, but it is arguably one of the best games of all time, in my opinion. Take that with what you will. It's pretty much my favorite puzzle game of all time, though. And I just love occasionally just replaying the game since I can beat it like in 1 hour. I see no problem there occasionally just playing a full playthrough in the snap of a finger. It's a lot of fun. And I love GLaDOS. And of course, the cake is a lie meme. Then we got a game that it wouldn't be until a little bit later on I would give Portal 2 a chance, and they really massively increased. Now, for people who like co-op stuff, they'll probably like the co-op mode that this game offers, which is great if you have a friend who's also really enjoys Portal. That's about the only way that or enjoys puzzle games. But I love this game. I still like the Portal 1 though the most because to me it's perfect and there is no way to surpass it. Though Portal 2 is still a great game in its own right. Then we have arguably the hardest game of the Dead or Alive series on it, and of course that is DOA 4, which would be the one of the actually first two fighting games I actually ever owned. On the 360 was this game. Boy, though, the spike in difficulty in this game way higher than I ever expected. Plus, it was interesting having a special character in this from actually the universe of Halo, with a Halo stage even, which is odd. And then this would be the introduction to the pain in the ass boss that is Alpha 152, which is a nightmare in this game. I just want to add. Yeah, good luck against her. But seriously, though, still this game is great. Superb. It looks great. It has aged very well. And it is interesting how this was a console exclusive, and it remains an exclusive. It's not gonna re-release or anything. Which is unfortunate. I would like to see this get a remaster. Though, you can't do too much improvement on it, because for its age, it still looks amazing. Then we have, arguably, I think, one of the most criminally underrated tactical RPGs of the 2000s. And that is Enchanted Arms. This would be one of the first 10 games I would ever play on the console. This would probably be my first RPG that I played on the console. This would be the first 7th console generation RPG I ever played. And this was one of the first tactic games in quite a while at the time that I had played. I like it, even with the super cheesy, somewhat at times cringy English dub, I still enjoy it. And the fact they got so many big name voice actors from different anime and stuff to do characters in this game. And yeah, believe it or not, this was a tactical RPG done by Ubisoft, believe it or not. And I loved it with the customization and the ability to get like different creatures in this universe, which sort of an element similar to Pokemon, but not quite the same. But still, a great game that deserves more love than it gets, even with a lot of not the great stereotypes on some things. Still, it's great when it comes to actual game mechanics. Also, arguably my favorite JRPG of the 360 era, and this game remains in like my top 5 favorite 360 games of all time. Nothing comes close, and this is a great game made by some of the people that were involved in the creation and worked on Final Fantasy 7, 8, and even 9. But specifically, there were quite a few people from Final Fantasy 7 and 8 that worked on this game, and you can tell it. And this is definitely, I think, one of the most underrated RPGs, if not the most underrated JRPG of the 7th generation. And the fact it was a Xbox exclusive is the real surpriser, because that was rare for Xbox at the time to get exclusive RPGs. So it's still rare nowadays to get RPGs or anything in general exclusive to Xbox anymore. Of course, then we got the, while in the future, the re-release with the remastered version of course, Fable The Lost Chapters, which is, of course, Fable 1 is my number one favorite game on the original Xbox. It is arguably, the Fable series is in my top 5 favorite RPG franchises of all time, and my top 10 favorite game franchises of all time, in fact. But this game holds a special place for me, always will, and I love. I wish more people would play Fable. This is actually probably the best way to play the original Fable, just because it definitely got, I think, some better stuff with updates, and it plays with a few less frame rate issues than the original, though for some reason they changed the voice actor and stuff, the voice modification on Jack of Blades, which I will never understand. Still great. Then we have the, of course, beloved by many people, Fable II, which was another one of the earliest games that I ever played on it. That was the main reason I originally picked up the 360 was for Fable, because the original Fable was one of the games that sold me originally to get the original Xbox, along with the first Halo. But this was the game that really got me to pick up in the first place, and I'm happy for it. This game is great, though I actually like another game of just a bit more, but it's pretty much up there at the top as my favorite on the console, and of course that is Fable 3, which is super cheap to this day. You can get this game for $5 or $6 easy. This is a game that deserves a lot more love. It does not deserve the hate that it actually gets. I wish more people would show some love to Fable 3, but with that said, that is just a bunch of games that hold a special place for me personally. And in general, hopefully you enjoyed part 2, going down memory lane with me on the first of the 3 consoles that I would actually play of the 7th gen. Next time we will be looking at part 3 and the final part of the 7th gen. And of course that will be the PS3. So with that said, leave a comment below. Tell me, what is your personal games? What was the game that got you originally get the Xbox? Like for me, it was Fable 2. What was yours? But I'll see y'all next time and stay safe.